Let me tell you in this video about the standards we have available from ISO on occupational health and safety management. And I will begin from who is developing those standards. There is a technical committee at the International Organization for Standardization. The number of this committee is 283, and that's the web page of the committee responsible for the development of ISO 45001 and for other standards about occupational health and safety management. There are 76 countries who have representatives in this committee and who participate in the development of standards, plus there are another 28 observing countries. So as you can see, a large international participation and agreement are needed for standards like ISO 45001 to be published and then to be accepted. On the ISO website, you can find detailed information about the countries participating and about the work undertaken by this committee, meaning the projects that are ongoing and the standards that have already been published. The most important work of this committee is, of course, ISO 45001, published in 2018, the first international standard with requirements for an occupational health and safety management system. It's important to specify this aspect that ISO 45001 is a standard with requirements because there are other standards on occupational health and safety management published by ISO and which are guidance standards, meaning that they don't include requirements but only guidelines. Why is this important? Because only the standards with requirements can be used for audit and certification. At the end of the course, after we see which are the requirements for this management system, I will give you details about the certification to ISO 45001. And we will discuss the certification for organizations, but also the certification of persons as auditors or practitioners or implementers. There are different levels for the certification of persons. ISO 45001 can be used by any organization that wants to establish an occupational health and safety system, regardless of what kind of activities it performs, how it works, what kind of risks it has to deal with, if it is private or state-owned, or maybe it is a not-for-profit organization, if it is a corporation, or maybe a small family business. The high-level structure of ISO 45001 is similar to that of other management system standards published by ISO, like for example ISO 9001 or ISO 14001. This is to facilitate the implementation of more than one standard at the same time and the development of the so-called integrated management systems, a solution adopted by many organizations who have to meet the requirements of more than one standard. Here in this table, we have the structure of ISO 45001. There are 10 clauses or chapters, and the requirements are to be found in chapters 4 to 10. The first 3 chapters do not include requirements. Chapter 1, called Scope, explains the purpose of this document, of this standard, who can use it and for what. The second chapter is called Normative References, but it includes no such references. It is present here in order to follow the structure of management system standards that I told you about earlier. And the third chapter, Terms and Definitions, includes, of course, definitions for many terms that we meet in the standard and that require an explanation. As we'll go on with the course, when we will meet terms that need a definition, I will come back here to this chapter and tell you what the definition says. We will focus in this course on chapters 4 to 10 of ISO 45001, where we do have requirements, and I won't go into details now because we will discuss each and every clause and sub-clause of the standard in the coming hours. A few words now about the standards related to ISO 45001 or the other members of this ISO 45000 family or series. We have, for example, an interesting and useful standard that I mentioned earlier, and this is ISO 45002. It is a guidance standard intended to help in the implementation of an occupational health and safety management system. Where ISO 45001 says what needs to be done, what is required. In other words, 45002 expands on those requirements and gives guidance and real-life examples on how it can be done or how the requirements can be met. This is the relationship between ISO 45001 and 45002. ISO 45003 is another interesting standard, also with guidelines, and it focuses on mental health. It is about managing psychosocial risks in the workplace. By the way, I have a course here on this platform that is dedicated to this standard and to its guidelines for psychological health and safety. We have also ISO 45004, a standard with guidance in relation to the processes for monitoring, measurement, analysis, and performance evaluation. We will discuss this subject later in the 9th chapter of ISO 45001, but for now, we should know that there is a standard which helps to develop indicators to assess an organization's health and safety performance. Then there is also ISO 45005, which is a publicly available specification with guidelines for safe working during the COVID-19 pandemic. This document is not as relevant today as it used to be in 2020 when it came out. And the last published standard as of today that is related to ISO 45001 is ISO 45006, another guidance standard on preventing and managing infectious diseases at work. There are also some ongoing projects for this committee, like, for example, an interesting document to address the health and safety risks arising from climate change. This will be ISO 45007. The place to go for information about the standards published or in development is, of course, the ISO website. That's iso.org. You can search there for ISO 45001. Then you go to the page of the technical committee responsible for this standard, and there you can see all the work of this committee, all the standards with their current status. Also, on the ISO website, you can see the status of any standard that you may be interested in. The standard can be in revision, or maybe it has been reviewed and confirmed. The idea is that each standard is reviewed generally once every 5 years or so. And if this review identifies the need to update a standard, then the revision process begins, and it can take a few years until the new edition of the standard is published and it replaces, of course, the previous version. This process of revising standards is necessary to keep them relevant as the world and the economies move forward. Okay, I don't want to go too much into technicalities, but I think it's important for you to have a good understanding of what standards are available and where you can find the standards that you may be interested in. I kept mentioning from the beginning of this course about an occupational health and safety management system. This is the subject for us. But what exactly is such a management system? What does it include? And what does it require to be useful for an organization? We will discuss those subjects in the next video.